January 1943. In the Hanford Desert of Washington state, convoys of trucks carrying materials moved through thin mist, leaving intermittent streaks of light on the cold ground. There were no signs, no project names, only wooden fences enclosing the area and power poles rising one after another like rows of metallic trees. At the same time, more than 3,000 kilometers away, in the Tennessee Valley, a tract of 56,200 acres was requisitioned by the U.S. Army. Residents were ordered to leave within 2 weeks. A small sign on the dirt road bore exactly 3 words: Clinton Engineer Works. This place would later become Oak Ridge, the first uranium enrichment center in human history. According to the War Department construction record, 1943, this project did not appear on any civilian map. It was registered under the code name Manhattan Engineer District, a title so ordinary that no one could have guessed it concealed the century's most secret plan. Those summoned to work received the same directive: build fast, ask nothing. They did not know what they were building, only that speed meant the survival of millions. On paper, the mission was assigned to one man, Major General Leslie R. Groves, who had previously overseen the construction of the Pentagon in 16 months, a record for both scale and speed. He received his orders from Washington in a small War Department office. We need a facility capable of producing materials for a new kind of weapon, before Germany does. Groves nodded, asked no questions, left the meeting room, tossed his cigarette into the trash, and said to his aide, "We'll have to build an entire city in the dark." According to the Manhattan District Engineering Log 1944, Groves was given full authority. He could select land, sign contracts, requisition, manpower, and use any resources within the reach of the United States. The very next day, he boarded a reconnaissance plane over Hanford, a barren stretch beside the Columbia River. Beneath the aircraft lay winding sand roads, no infrastructure, no electricity, no houses. Groves looked out the window and wrote a single line in his notebook: "Good isolation. Build here." At the same time, he wired Tennessee: "Prepare site immediately." Within 90 days, both locations had become massive construction zones. At Hanford, 45,000 workers gathered to erect tents, pull cables, and lay the foundations for 3 plutonium reactors. The temperature dropped below freezing, yet cranes operated through the night. The clanging of metal echoed in the wind, blending with the hiss of steam from makeshift boilers. One worker later recalled in an interview in 1957 at Spokane, "We got paid extra for night shifts, but no one had time to spend it. When you looked up, the whole sky was glowing red from the welding flames." At Oak Ridge, 300 megawatts of electricity were diverted exclusively to power massive centrifuges, each nearly 3 stories high, running day and night. Workers called them the Silver Snakes, as they coiled around the Y-12 plant, emitting a faint blue magnetic light. According to the Tennessee Valley Authority Energy Report, 1944, the power consumption of this area equaled the entire state of Tennessee's pre-war output. It was an unprecedented paradox, consuming enormous energy to create a kind of energy no one yet understood. In New Mexico, while the 2 construction sites were still in chaos, Groves flew to meet J. Robert Oppenheimer, chosen to direct the secret research center at Los Alamos. The 2 men sat in a wooden house on the Pajarito Plateau. Wind slipped through the cracks, scattering blueprints of an unfinished reactor. Oppenheimer remained silent for a long time, then said, "General, if this works, the sun will rise on Earth." Groves replied, "Then make sure it rises first for us." Outside, convoys of trucks with false license plates continued driving through the night. The drivers did not know their destinations, only carrying a slip marked Hanford or CEW. Some disappeared in the snow. Others arrived after 48 hours without rest. Inside the cargo holds were thousands of crates of copper, lead, steel, and sealed nuclear instruments. Everything operated in silence, and it was precisely that silence that made the miracle possible. 3 cities rising simultaneously in 3 states, tens of thousands of people working without knowing why, yet moving at the speed of war. According to the U.S. Army Ordnance Construction Summary, 1,945, in less than 30 months, over 125,000 people built the entire system for uranium, plutonium, production, and bomb assembly. Each building rose 25 meters high, each gas conduit weighed hundreds of tons, yet everything was completed on schedule. Photographs captured sand swirling around scaffolds, dust-covered faces, and eyes fixed on something the world had never seen before. When the floodlights of the construction sites lit up for the first time, thousands of bulbs flared simultaneously, reflecting off the newly installed steel panels. One engineer wrote in his journal, "It looked like we built a sunrise." And indeed, it was another kind of dawn, the dawn of atomic energy, of an age where construction speed surpassed imagination itself. Amid snow, amid dust, amid the shadows of nameless workers, the impossible city was born. And in that silence, history began to hum. In the summer of 1942, the map of Europe was covered with the emblem of Nazi Germany. Hitler's army had advanced deep into Stalingrad, and in the west, London still bore scars from the bombings. In secret reports sent back to Washington, one phrase appeared repeatedly: Uran Project, German atomic program, progressing. According to the Office of Scientific Research Memorandum, May 1942, German scientists had succeeded in isolating uranium-235 on a laboratory scale. The question for America was no longer whether it could win the war with an atomic bomb, but whether there was still enough time to win it by any other means. At the White House, President Franklin D. Roosevelt received the first analysis from Vannevar Bush's team. The report stated, "At present, the United States has no facility capable of producing nuclear materials." The phrase, "no facility," became an obsession for the War Department. While Germany had physicists like Heisenberg and Hahn, the American side possessed only a few notes and a small laboratory in Chicago. According to the University of Chicago Metallurgical Lab notes, 1942, Enrico Fermi's team had to use graphite bricks bought from a local steel company to test chain reactions. That was when America realized it was entering a race from almost zero. All military theories of the time revolved around chemical and mechanical energy, bombs, artillery, fuel, and warships. The engineering training system still followed World War I principles: design, test, produce, then scale up. But nuclear physics could not wait for that cycle. It demanded that science and organization advance together, even though no one knew where to begin. According to the Army Technical Review, 1943, reactor models at that time existed only on paper. There were no heat-resistant materials strong enough, no formulas to cool uranium cores, and no data on radiation at an industrial scale. The first designs were drawn in pencil on 2-meter-wide sheets, then crossed out again and again. A DuPont engineer wrote in his diary, "Every day we walk into the plant not knowing what will burn today." For the military, the problem was even larger than physics itself. They had to work with scientists who had never taken orders from anyone, while the scientists had to operate under wartime deadlines. One side measured in minutes, the other in equations. When the Science Policy Council met in June 1942, General Wilhelm Steyr asked Oppenheimer directly, "How long until we can create a controlled nuclear reaction?" Oppenheimer replied, "Maybe 10 years, if things go well." Steyr tapped his pen on the table. "That's too late." From that moment, the strategy changed. Groves, then still finishing the Pentagon project, was invited to a closed meeting with Bush and James Conant. He realized what was killing the American nuclear project was not a lack of talent, but a mindset. Everyone wanted certainty before taking action. He said simply, "If we wait for certainty, we'll lose while waiting." That sentence became the guiding principle of the entire Manhattan Project. But changing the mindset was not easy. Many Washington planners believed that building a uranium and plutonium production system on an industrial scale would take at least 10 years. Some financial advisors even wrote in their memos, "Too complex, too slow, too late." They feared risks, waste, and failure. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Nazi Germany already had uranium enrichment facilities in Kiel and Berlin. Time was the only thing America could not produce more of. According to the Scientific Intelligence Summary 1942, U.S. intelligence reported that Germany's program might attempt a chain reaction experiment by 1944. That made every technical limitation a luxury. Emergency meetings were held continuously in Washington. In one internal War Department note, a handwritten line from Steyer read, "We are not just building a bomb, we are buying time." Internal conflicts began to erupt. The military demanded speed first, while scientists resisted out of fear of error. Ernest Lawrence, the Berkeley physicist, reacted sharply in a phone call with Groves. "You can't order atoms to obey military command." Groves replied in an even, cold voice, "I don't order atoms, I order you." That clash became a symbol of the entire era, where reason and command coexisted in the same room. The years 1942–1943 were a time when the world hung between two choices, to understand the secret of the atom or to be consumed by it in someone else's hands. While Germany focused on mechanized warfare, America wagered everything on something no one had ever tried: turning science into a weapon. According to the War Department Research Allocation Report 1943, the initial budget was $6 million, and it would increase 300 times in the next 2 years. When autumn came, thousands of engineers, chemists, and physicists were summoned to Washington. They did not know what they were about to join, only that everything had to be completed before the enemy breathes. In a small third-floor room of the War Department, Leslie R. Groves stood over a wide map where red pins marked Hanford, Oak Ridge, and Los Alamos. He drew a pencil line connecting the 3 points and said quietly, "This is the line of time." The race had begun, and from that moment, America was no longer building structures, it was building the future. Before moving on to the next part, if this story resonates with you, please like and share so more people can see it. Share your thoughts in the comments, because every word from you motivates us to create more great videos. Born into the family of a minister in Albany, New York, Leslie Richard Groves grew up amid the discipline and silence of the church. He once said his father taught him only one lesson: if you do something, do it to the end. After graduating from West Point in 1918, Groves did not choose the battlefield but entered the Army Corps of Engineers, where a man was measured by what he built, not by the medals he wore. By 1941, he was assigned to oversee the construction of the Pentagon, then the largest building in the world, completed in 16 months, a feat that astonished the entire War Department. He didn't build buildings, a colleague later said, he built time. When appointed to lead the Manhattan Project in September 1942, Groves was 46 years old. He was neither a scientist nor a politician. He was the embodiment of the engineer, soldier, a man who used organizational instinct to bend limits until they broke. According to the War Department Appointment Memo 1942, the decision to select Groves was signed in less than 12 hours after a meeting with Vannevar Bush and James Conant. Bush stated plainly, "We need someone who hates delay." Roosevelt agreed, and within a day, America had its commander for the century's most secret project. Groves was a man of 24-hour decisions, and he forced the entire system to move at that pace. In a letter to the Treasury Department, he wrote, "Delays are more expensive than mistakes." According to the Army Corps Construction Directive 1943, all contracts related to the Manhattan Project could be signed without congressional approval. Groves selected contractors, approved budgets, and granted material priority at the AAA level, higher than aircraft or ship production. He demanded that companies build first and calculate later. A DuPont engineer recalled, "He gave us 48 hours to start pouring concrete. The plans weren't even finished. In Groves's system, speed was the measure of faith. He once told the Oak Ridge supervisory team, "Every day we waste is a day the enemy gains." Meetings lasted only minutes. If anyone said, "Need more time," he would reply, "Then you're in the wrong war." To manage tens of thousands of people across 3 states, Groves created a command chain precise to the hour. According to the Manhattan District Organization chart, 1,943, each site, Hanford, Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, had an area engineer with full local authority reporting directly to him. No intermediaries. No departments are waiting for approval. Every decision flowed straight from Groves's desk to the construction sites. But beneath that steel exterior, Groves understood the fragility of time. He knew he was leading a team composed largely of independent scientists, people more accustomed to argument than obedience. Instead of forcing them with military law, he surrounded them with structure. He ensured they had everything: power, housing, libraries, and laboratories. "Give them everything," he wrote in a telegram to Oak Ridge in November 1943. "Accept the excuse to be slow." That cold control created miracles. According to the Engineering Progress Bulletin, 1944, Groves had a habit of conducting unannounced inspections. He would appear at night, walking between rows of operating machines, flashlight in hand. An engineer recalled. He didn't say much. He looked at his watch, looked at people, then looked at progress. If he saw a machine stopped, he didn't yell. He simply asked, "How long?" And upon hearing the answer, he recorded every minute precisely in his notebook. Later, many called him the stopwatch general. Behind Groves stood a triangle of power he created himself, each corner a different form of genius. At Los Alamos, he placed his trust in J. Robert Oppenheimer, who had never led a project before. "He had the mind to see the whole picture," Groves said after the war. Oppenheimer was the intellectual heart of the project, while Groves was its bloodstream. At Berkeley, Ernest Lawrence, Nobel Prize-winning chemist, oversaw the development of cyclotrons and electromagnetic separation technology for Oak Ridge. And at Hanford, the industrial giant DuPont took on the most dangerous task, the plutonium reactors. Groves did not seek harmony. He engineered controlled conflict. Each member of his team was placed in competition to accelerate progress. When Lawrence complained that DuPont was being favored, Groves replied curtly, "Outrun them, then." When Oppenheimer requested more scientists, Groves said, "You already have the best minds in the country. Use them faster." According to the Los Alamos communication records, 1944, such exchanges happened almost weekly, often ending in long silences and a nod. Groves's personal drive was not fame. He believed time itself was a weapon. In a 1948 speech, he said, "We didn't win because we were smarter. We won because we were faster." For him, building in darkness was not a risk. It was the only way to stay one day ahead of the enemy. When the war ended, people asked what he thought of the Manhattan Project's extraordinary speed. Groves simply replied, "It wasn't speed. It was survival." That sentence became his legacy, a reminder that in the world of engineering and war, sometimes discipline is the highest form of courage, and in that discipline the impossible began to move. By the end of 1942, while most construction companies were still asking what to build, Leslie R. Groves answered with an order, "Start now." According to the Manhattan District Engineering Log, 1943, that was the moment the traditional engineering process was completely broken. Instead of waiting for a finalized design, he ordered that construction and research proceed simultaneously, build as you design. Every day, scientists at Los Alamos updated new data, and within hours, engineers at Oak Ridge or Hanford had already adjusted their drawings. Physics and engineering merged into a race unlike anything seen before. That principle defied every technical standard of the era. According to the U.S. Army Construction Review, 1944, no project had ever tested a reactor while simultaneously building an operating plant. but Groves believed that perfection would kill speed. He told DuPont contractors, "If we wait for certainty, the war will be over before the concrete dries." From that point forward, the concept of accuracy was redefined, not as absolute precision, but as being sufficient to move one step further. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, became the first testing ground for that strategy. On a 56,200-acre site, 75,000 workers labored day and night to raise the Y-12 and K-25 buildings, two massive uranium separation facilities. According to the Tennessee Valley Authority Energy Report, 1944, the plant consumed 300 megawatts of electricity, equivalent to the entire pre-war generating capacity of the state of Tennessee. Each row of electromagnetic separators stretched hundreds of meters, roaring with the hum of thousands of silver coils. When the government ran out of copper for windings, the Treasury Department was forced to loan 14,700 tons of silver from the National Reserve. One engineer recalled, "We were pulling metal out of the Treasury to melt it for the future." At Hanford, Washington, the plan was even bolder. Across a 586,000-acre desert expanse, Groves assigned 45,000 workers to erect 3 plutonium reactors, each over 30 meters tall, containing thousands of graphite blocks to slow neutrons. According to the Hanford Engineer Works Report, 1944, the cooling system for each reactor required more than 30,000 gallons of water per minute, pumped directly from the Columbia River through pipelines nearly 15 miles long. No one had ever tried this before, and no one knew whether it would explode. It had to be done anyway. Groves wrote in his journal, "Build it anyway. We'll understand it later." Oh, alongside the two industrial sites, Los Alamos, New Mexico, was chosen as the research center. 6,000 scientists and engineers lived and worked in a complex nestled within the Pajarito Mountains. It was both a laboratory and a secret community. Oppenheimer called it the Mesa of Paradox. By day, physicists modeled bomb detonations on chalkboards. By night, they heard the rumble of trucks carrying uranium from Oak Ridge across the desert. According to the Los Alamos Site Report, 1944, the facility was built in just 12 months, with no paved roads and unstable electricity, yet it became the birthplace of the theory behind humanity's first nuclear explosion. The speed of these 3 sites was guaranteed by the government's highest logistical priority, AAA priority. Every resource, steel, copper, cement, even manpower could be requisitioned within 24 hours. When a steel shipment arrived late, Groves called the Department of Transportation directly and said, "Move the trains or I'll move the people." According to the War Department Logistics Memo, 1943, civilian rail lines were temporarily rerouted to serve the Manhattan Project exclusively. A closed transport network was created, uranium ore from Colorado, silver from Kentucky, steel from Pittsburgh, all converging on Tennessee and Washington, leaving no trace in public records. The numbers behind that speed stunned the engineering world. A 30-mile railroad at Oak Ridge was completed in just 3 months, capable of carrying thousands of tons of equipment daily. The Santa Fe-Los Alamos route, 35 kilometers long, was carved through mountains within months, turning desolate terrain into a discreet transport hub. According to the U.S. Army Transportation Command, 1944, these lines carried an average of 2,500 tons of materials per day, equivalent to a large metallurgical plant. At the same time, a dedicated power grid was established across Tennessee, Washington, and New Mexico, linking over 1,000 kilometers of high-voltage lines to provide stable electricity for the entire project. On the ground, the build-as-you-design approach created absurd moments that only wartime urgency could justify. Engineers were laying pipelines when scientists at Los Alamos changed the uranium enrichment ratio, forcing entire systems to be rebuilt overnight. According to engineer William S. Hart in a 1952 interview, Groves didn't ask for drawings, he asked for results. Those who worked for him learned that mistakes could be fixed, but delays were a sin. By 1944, all 3 sites were operating simultaneously. Oak Ridge produced the first gram of uranium, Hanford generated pure plutonium, and Los Alamos prepared to test the bomb. According to the War Department Progress Summary, January 1945, the entire system was completed in less than 28 months from groundbreaking. A young engineer wrote in his diary, "We built the future before we even understood it." Amid the smoke and hammering steel, the Manhattan Project had transcended the final limit of engineering building before knowing where it would lead. And within that absurdity, America discovered its true strength, turning the unknown into the foundation of what was to come. And that was how the impossible took shape: steel, fire, and will. At dawn on the 16th of July 1945, the Jornada del Muerto desert, a barren expanse in New Mexico, was eerily silent. The wind drifted softly through rows of bare power poles, carrying cables from Los Alamos to the test site. A few hundred meters away, inside a small concrete bunker, Robert Oppenheimer sat quietly before the countdown clock. Beside him, General Leslie R. Groves stood with arms crossed, eyes fixed on a 7-centimeter thick blast-proof glass panel. According to the Manhattan District Field Log, July 1945, uranium-235 from Oak Ridge and plutonium-239 from Hanford had just been combined to form humanity's first experimental bomb code named Trinity. Only 28 months had passed since the project began. From rough sketches on paper, America had now created an object capable of releasing the energy of the Sunday. According to the War Department Ordnance Summary, 1945, the bomb was mounted atop a 30-meter steel tower, weighing nearly 4,600 kilograms, connected to dozens of instruments measuring heat, pressure, radiation, and neutron flux. Oppenheimer walked around the bunker, holding an unlit cigarette. He murmured to a colleague, "If this fails, we'll never know why." At 5 hours, 29 minutes and 45 seconds a.m., the night split open like a wound. Light erupted violently, so blinding that it turned darkness into day. According to the Los Alamos Technical Record, 1945, the temperature at ground zero exceeded 10 million degrees Celsius, equivalent to the core of the sun, and the released energy reached approximately 20,000 tons of TNT. The shockwave spread across 16 kilometers, sweeping sand and dust into a colossal fireball 12 kilometers high, forming a natural glass later called trinitite. One observer recalled, "The ground shook like a train, and the light pierced through even closed eyelids." Inside the control bunker, silence lingered after the explosion. An engineer wrote in his diary, "No one clapped, we just looked at each other, saying nothing." When the smoke cleared, Oppenheimer lowered his protective goggles, his lips moving with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Groves, in his report to Washington, wrote only a single dry line: "Project efficiency, 100% functional." Two extremes: one man saw the universe unfold, the other saw a process completed on schedule. According to the Army Radiological Survey, 1945, the released energy vaporized everything within a 1.5 kilometers radius. Steel columns melted, the desert floor turned into green glass, and the sand beneath their feet grew sticky like tar. One officer described, "We looked down and saw our boots melting." 16 kilometers away, the shockwave shattered radar station windows, and operators thought an earthquake had struck. Guards at Alamogordo, 160 kilometers distant, reported, "Light brighter than dawn." When the real sun rose, the desert lay under a layer of grey dust. Groves stepped out of the bunker, his face coated with a thin film of ash. He looked up at the sky, then turned to the engineers and said, "It worked." One observer replied, "General, that's an understatement." Groves did not react. He merely ordered the data collected, instruments sealed, and the exact time recorded again: 5 hours, 29 minutes, and 45 seconds. According to the U.S. Army Ordnance Analysis, 1945, every measuring system functioned flawlessly, with no deviation beyond design limits. That meant the production chain from ore extraction in Colorado, refinement in Oak Ridge to reactor output at Hanford had operated with perfect precision. Hours later, at Los Alamos, the research team received confirmation of success. A witness recalled in a 1965 interview, "Oppenheimer didn't smile. He just sat staring at the map. In that silence, everyone understood the world had entered a new age." According to the Atomic Energy Interim Report 1945, within 48 hours, the test data was sent directly to Washington, then forwarded to President Harry Truman in Potsdam. Upon reading the message, Truman simply said, "We have unlocked a new age." For the U.S. military, the results exceeded every expectation. Army generals could scarcely believe that in just 2 years, a network built from empty land had produced the energy of the Sunday. An internal report stated plainly, "The Trinity test confirms full operational capability of the Manhattan Project." Within weeks, 2 additional bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, were assembled, ready for the next operation. That night, Groves returned to headquarters and opened his notebook. He struck out the line, "Test pending," and wrote 2 words, "Proven complete." No embellishment, no emotion, but for him, it was a declaration of engineering victory. Meanwhile, at Los Alamos, Oppenheimer stepped onto his balcony as the night wind carried traces of hot dust. He looked south, where the desert still glowed faintly orange, and whispered, "The light we made will never fade." According to the Los Alamos Archive Oral History, 1964, many engineers later said they couldn't sleep that night. They knew they had achieved what had never been done before, but also that no one could return to the old world. Outside, the New Mexico sky brightened fully. The sunlight merged with the light of the past explosion, making the desert shimmer as if glowing once more. And in that light, the impossible became real. When the light from the Trinity test had barely faded, Washington already saw a weapon that would not only change the battlefield but also redefine how humanity understood power itself. According to the War Department Economic Analysis, 1946, the Manhattan Project cost $2.2 billion USD, equivalent to 0.4% of the wartime US GDP, yet its outcome reshaped the entire Pacific theater. While Europe was still tallying victory over Berlin, American generals were calculating Japan's reaction time. "If we use this weapon once," a Truman advisor wrote in a memorandum, "the war will end before Christmas." In just 28 months, 3 industrial sites, Oak Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos, were built and brought to full operation. According to the U.S. Army Corps Construction Summary, 1945, this remains an unmatched record in U.S. industrial history. No project, not even during the space age, has replicated that pace. Each site functioned as a miniature nation. Oak Ridge refined uranium, Hanford produced plutonium, and Los Alamos designed and assembled the weapons. All 3 operated to the same rhythm, reporting to one man, Major General Leslie R. Groves. In the war's final months, Oak Ridge produced 50 kilograms of uranium, 235 ready for Little Boy, while Hanford delivered over 6 kilograms of pure plutonium to Los Alamos for Fat Man. According to the Manhattan District Technical Review, August 1945, the entire supply chain ran 24 hours a day, without a single hour's interruption for 18 months. Groves called it industrial warfare, war fought with compressors, coils, and high voltage. The project's logistical power forced the War Department to overhaul the nation's entire supply system. More than 125,000 people from 35 states were reassigned to the 3 industrial zones. They came from everywhere, noted a 1,944 manpower report, from the mines of Colorado to the shipyards of Virginia. At Oak Ridge, 30 miles of new rail lines carried thousands of tons of equipment daily. At Hanford, 180 megawatts of electricity were drawn directly from the Grand Coulee Dam, turning Washington's desert into a city of light. Meanwhile, Los Alamos, hidden atop the Pajarito Plateau, was connected by the 35-kilometer Santa Fe-Los Alamos route, quietly transporting materials and people in complete secrecy. According to the U.S., Army Transportation Command Report, 1945, Manhattan trains had their own schedules, independent of civilian systems, carrying false numbers and receiving absolute priority on every line. On those trains were unmarked metal containers, each worth over $1 million in nuclear materials. Every shipment was a fragment of a national secret, part of a current of energy pulsing across America like a colossal bloodstream. At that scale, the Manhattan Project was not merely an engineering achievement, but an industrial engine of victory. When Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima on the morning of the 6th of August 1945, it released energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT, erasing a city in seconds. 3 days later, Fat Man detonated over Nagasaki with a force of 21,000 tons of TNT. According to the U.S. Army Strategic Bombing Survey 1946, the two blasts killed over 150,000 people and forced Japan to surrender unconditionally on the 15th of August 1945. That event not only ended World War II but also ushered in the atomic age where engineering became the language of power. Oppenheimer wrote in a memorandum to the Atomic Energy Commission, "We built a machine that ended a war, but also began a new one." Groves was more pragmatic. This is logistics at its highest form. His words were no exaggeration. In truth, the Manhattan Project was the culmination of every logistical, financial, and scientific system the industrial world had ever created. According to the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, 1947, the electricity supplied to Manhattan facilities could have powered the entire city of New York for 4 years. The amount of steel used equaled 1/5 of the nation's total 1,943 production. The manpower was enough to form a mechanized army corps, and all of it was directed from a small Washington office where Groves worked 16 hours a day. An officer from his administrative team once wrote, "He ran 3 cities like they were engines on the same shaft." When the war ended, Oak Ridge workers lowered the flag above the uranium enrichment towers, and Hanford's reactors gradually went silent. Many never knew what they had been part of. They received only a short notice. "Your work here helped end the war." According to the Manhattan District Closing Statement, December 1946, most project records were sealed, plants dismantled, and worker communities dispersed, leaving behind ghost towns, monuments to an era of speed, but its influence never faded. From then on, every defense program from nuclear to space took the Manhattan Project as its organizational model. Engineering, science, administration, and industry fused into a single structure, driven by the belief that time itself could be manufactured as a weapon. The day the world heard of Japan's surrender, Groves wrote only 2 words in his notebook: "Mission complete." For him, victory did not come from the moment a button was pressed, but from the first hammer strike at Oak Ridge 2 years earlier. And that was how the factory won the war, not with noise but with precision, steel, and time. When World War II ended, the secret cities of the Manhattan Project suddenly returned to silence. In Oak Ridge, the barbed wire fences still stood, but the factory nameplates had been removed. In Hanford, desert winds swept through the abandoned concrete buildings, carrying the hollow echoes of tens of thousands of departed workers. According to the U.S. Army Closure Report 1946, more than 75,000 people had worked in Oak Ridge and 45,000 inches Hanford, yet most never knew what they had helped create. All they ever heard, repeated endlessly by supervisors, was, "You're building something that will end the war." Years later, when the secret was revealed, many realized they had stood at the center of one of the greatest undertakings in human history. A worker named Mary Lowe recalled in a 1961 interview, "I worked on the gas separation line for 2 years, thinking it was a power plant. When I heard about Hiroshima, I stopped, put my hand on the table, and cried." These people lived in isolation, well paid but forbidden to speak of their work. Their mail was censored, their phone calls monitored, and every trip outside required registration with the military police. They became citizens of a temporary nation where silence was a duty. After the victory, Major General Leslie R. Groves returned to Washington to submit his final report to the War Department. He received the Distinguished Service Medal, but no ceremony of honor followed. A year later, he left the military no speech, no farewell. According to the Army Personnel Record, 1948, Groves declined all invitations to lecture, saying only to his family, "My job was to finish." All his life, he believed speed was not glory, but obligation. At the same time, the DuPont engineering team disbanded. The company, which had managed the entire Hanford Engineer Works, voluntarily withdrew from military contracts, leaving all equipment and facilities to the government. A DuPont engineer wrote to Groves, "We built the fire, but it's not ours to keep." In the Hanford desert, the tire tracks, metal fences, and smokestacks slowly faded into memory. They were neither preserved nor restored. According to the Atomic Energy Commission Transition Report 1947, most of the Hanford facilities were dismantled, leaving only 3 graphite reactors lying still beneath the sand. The cost of speed was measured not in money, but in the lifetimes of those who gave everything to it. Over 30 months, most workers labored 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no holidays. Respiratory illness, burns, and mild radiation exposure were common. Yet no one stopped. An internal DuPont report from 1945 recorded, "Worker turnover, less than 1%. From engineers to welders. They all shared the belief that the world needed them, even if they didn't know what that world would look like." At Los Alamos, after the bomb was completed, J. Robert Oppenheimer walked away from the project like a man who had lost something. He became the symbol of scientific conscience, while Groves became the symbol of engineering discipline. According to the Atomic Energy Oral History 1964, the two never met again. Each carried half of the same question: could speed ever rise above responsibility? Though they vanished from the spotlight, their legacy endured in the scientific and industrial programs that followed. The organizational model of the Manhattan Project, linking the military, industry, and academia, became the foundation for every major American defense and space initiative, from Project Mercury to Apollo. The principles Groves established, parallel design, technical priority, and closed-loop supply management, were directly adopted by NASA. According to the National Science Foundation Review 1969, over 60% of Apollo's engineering processes stemmed directly from the Manhattan Project's organizational methods. As the world entered peacetime, the engineers of the Manhattan Project slowly blended back into the crowd. They returned to jobs at power companies, research institutes, and universities. No one spoke of the days at Oak Ridge or Hanford. Yet in their personnel records, there was always a small line under experience: Manhattan Engineer District, 1943, 1945. A faint trace enough for those who had been there to recognize one another by a glance. They had no monuments, no heroic songs, but they built the foundation of a new century. Those workers, engineers, and scientists dissolved into the flow of history, leaving behind 3 cities and a light that still glows over the New Mexico desert. And in that silence after victory, the engineers simply disappeared, leaving the world they had built behind. When the war ended, the sands of the New Mexico desert still bore the green scar of trinitite, formed at 10 million degrees Celsius, a testament to the moment humanity touched the energy of the Sunday. According to the U.S. Geological Survey Report 1952, that circular mark stretched nearly 1,100 meters across a relic of an era built from steel, electricity, and the belief that nothing is impossible. The Manhattan Project proved that impossible was only a temporary boundary when will and engineering met. Yet within that triumph, the world also learned that speed could outpace morality, and that victory sometimes arrived too quickly for humanity to understand its cost. Later, when Leslie R. Groves signed the order to dismantle the facilities in 1946, He could not have known that the organizational model he built would shape generations of nuclear and space programs. Oppenheimer, looking at the reflection of Trinity's light across the desert, saw not only the achievement of physics but also the fragility of power itself. He said in 1965, "We knew the world would not be the same. Most people were silent." That sentence became the echo of an age when humankind first realized it was strong enough to destroy itself. According to the Atomic Energy Commission Bulletin, 1946, within just 2 years after the war, more than 200 nuclear research facilities had emerged, paving the way for energy, medicine, and space exploration. Over 70,000 workers returned to ordinary life, carrying with them the discipline of speed and the courage to step into the unknown. The National Science Foundation Review, 1969, recorded that this foundation directly supported the Apollo, Polaris, and Voyager programs. But whenever one looks back toward the Trinity Desert, the question remains, did we build a weapon or knowledge? The Manhattan Project opened the door to the atomic age, while forcing humanity to confront the fear of its own creation. The light of Hiroshima radiated far beyond that city into nuclear energy, the Cold War, and every decision that still shapes the modern world. That light stands as a double symbol, half a triumph of intellect, half a warning. Groves once said, "We were at war, and the goal was to finish." But the world that followed was no longer as simple as war. Each technical breakthrough since has carried the same question: can speed ever replace understanding? Today, when we look at the black and white photographs of Oak Ridge or Hanford, we see not only colossal factories but also thousands of silent faces, the people who laid the foundation of the modern age. In the wind that crosses Trinity, one might still hear the hammer strikes, the hum of 300 megawatts, and the quiet vow of 125,000 men and women who believed they were building something right. They did not build temples, they built the future. And when that light rose over the desert, humanity proved one simple truth. Speed is not just a matter of engineering, it is a matter of belief. And in that belief, we found both our triumph and our warning. If this story makes you believe in courage, precision, survival, brilliance, leave a follow and share your thoughts. Every reader, every reflection, helps preserve the memory of that time when humanity turned sand into energy and will into technology. A single like can keep alive the memory of the engineers, scientists, and workers who built what the world once thought impossible. They did not build temples, they built the future. And in the instant that light erupted across the desert, humanity proved something simple yet profound. Speed is not just a matter of engineering, it is a matter of belief. And in that belief, we found both our triumph and our warning.